I'm Jeff Finkelstein, the President and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh and a proud member of the steering committee for this summit. I get the honor to introduce our next speaker, my colleague Jonathan Greenblatt. Jonathan is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, the leading anti-hate organization. Since becoming CEO in 2015, he has modernized ADL while refocusing it on the mission it had since its founding in 1913, to fight the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. In recent years, as we all know, hate has escalated in frightening ways. Hate crimes at all-time highs, surveys show unprecedented levels of hate online, etc. As the person who started #StopHateForProfit, the most successful boycott of Facebook by major companies ever, and has led efforts to clean up YouTube and gaming platforms, Jonathan routinely speaks about the need to fight hate online and how we can clean up these amazing but troubling social media platforms. Under Jonathan's leadership, ADL has become the leading organization fighting hate and extremism online. He's worked closely with executives at the world's biggest tech companies. He's testified in front of Congress multiple times. Before joining ADL, he served as Special Assistant to President Obama and Director of the White House Office of Social Innovation, and he co-founded Ethos Water, which was acquired by Starbucks in 2005. There's more on his bio in your packets, but I want to talk from a more personal perspective. On October 28th, 2018, the day after that horrible attack here in my hometown, our federation had a major gathering with all kinds of diversity from our Pittsburgh community and from beyond. Thousands of people were in attendance, and it was really comforting for me to see Jonathan Greenblatt right there among everyone. A year later, when we had the first year commemoration of that attack, Jonathan again was back here in town volunteering. I thank Jonathan for his leadership and for his caring, and with that, Jonathan Greenblatt.
Thank you, Jeff, for that nice introduction. I appreciate it. And I am really humbled to be back here in Pittsburgh, this amazing community whose people really are a beacon of neighborliness and civility, of kindness and candor. As Jeff said, I've been here a few times in the past several years. I wish the initial prompt had been different, but it's an honor and privilege to be back here and to speak to all of you today. I'm inspired and awed by the work this community has done and continues to do to overcome one of the deadliest acts of hate in our time. The horrific attack on 3 congregations at the Tree of Life Synagogue nearly 3 years ago. This gathering that you've put together, featuring an impressive list of more than 100 leading experts on extremism and hate, it's the ultimate response to an unthinkable tragedy, one that stole the lives of 11 innocent people, wounded an entire community, and forever changed the lives, not just of Jews in this city, but I dare say Jews in this country who never thought it could happen here. The message that we're sending today is not just one of resilience, but of healing and hope, of overcoming adversity through the efforts of individual citizens and friends and neighbors who care deeply about one another. Pittsburgh hasn't cowered in the face of hatred. You've seen an opportunity to do better, to lift each other up, to roll up your sleeves, and to work toward finding common solutions, and to help build a better world. And you've done it with every imaginable institution in the city. I saw it at the anniversary event that Jeff just alluded to. Sports teams, universities, and major gatherings like this one. The way people from different faiths and walks of life and different political persuasions all came together. Pittsburgh is a model for the rest of the country and the world to emulate. And I'm so impressed by your efforts to organize this conference devoted to seeking solutions in a world scarred by anti-Semitism and rising hatred. The caliber of speakers and thought-provoking discussions are sure to have an impact far beyond these four walls over the next several days. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your efforts to keep up fighting hate here in America and keeping it on America's agenda, because as we all know, there's still so much work to be done. For the Jewish community and ADL, the attack here in Pittsburgh weighs on our hearts as a painful reminder of what can happen when hate is left unchecked. ADL is the oldest anti-hate organization in America, and we started to see a worrying uptick of anti-Semitism and hate just a few years ago. The whole world saw what happened in Charlottesville in 2017 as neo-Nazis with tiki torches marched through town yelling, "Jews will not replace us." And then the attack here in Pittsburgh, which was followed by Poway and Jersey City and Muncie, all of which took place against a wave of harassment and assaults in Brooklyn against the Orthodox Jewish community that continues today, long after the photographers have left. And then, of course, the January 6th insurrection at our Capitol, which was a culmination in many ways of this rising hate. On that day, the rioters were seething with rage and embraced outrageous conspiracies, including virulent anti-Semitism, which some wore proudly emblazoned on their sweatshirts or around their arms. Let's be clear. The unapologetic extremism and poisonous hate that we saw on display at the insurrection, and that is what it was, hasn't gone away. Not by a long shot. Our experts at ADL are monitoring it, documenting it, reporting it to law enforcement every single day because it continues. And they will tell you what the data over the past 20 years demonstrates, that extreme right-wing violence has been the source of the vast majority of violent, hate-related murders in this country. The threat that white supremacists, anti-government activists, and their ilk cannot be understated. It is a clear and present danger to Jews and other minorities that live among us. But that isn't the whole story. Indeed, it feels like every day you can open your phone or turn on the TV or pick up the paper, to those who still do that, and see instances of shocking anti-Semitism and hate that could chill you to your bones. For example, there are the never-ending comments made by elected officials from all sides, from sitting members of Congress to state legislators to city councilors, giving credence to ideas that Jews are only interested in themselves and hold powerful positions or join public service just to steer government policies in their favor. These are followed by an ever-expanding pattern of Holocaust trivialization, distortionism, and denialism, comparing the state-sponsored persecution, torture, and slaughter of 6 million Jews to requests to wear masks indoors or vaccinate our children to preserve public safety. There is no comparison. And then there's the continuing spread of online conspiracy theories so often rooted in anti-Jewish hate, from the bizarre, like QAnon, or Jewish space lasers, which is not a thing, to the more relatable, like COVID-19. Indeed, ADL saw that the global pandemic catalyzed a wave of ugly, groundless anti-Semitic claims, such as the notion that the novel coronavirus was bioengineered by Israel to kill Muslims, or the idea that Jews singularly were responsible for spreading the virus, to the charge that Jews were deliberately profiting from the vaccines. And that's a short hop to the constant, relentless obsession and demonization of Israel. We see it on our college campuses, even in the halls of Congress. When the Jewish state is involved, defensive systems that protect civilians of all ethnicities shouldn't be funded because somehow they're symbols of racism. Collective punishment by the Jewish state is criticized, but applying collective punishment against the Jewish state in the form of boycotts somehow is laudable, even if the people behind these campaigns can't clearly explain their logic when asked about it by a reporter. Finally, who can forget the shocking surge of violence against Jews during the recent conflict between Hamas and Israel earlier this year, when Jewish people were brazenly and brutally beaten in broad daylight while they walked down the street or ate dinner on a sidewalk. Their only crime, their only offense was being Jewish. And to the elected officials or public personalities or so-called activists who suggest that hardline Israeli policies are actually the root of the problem, let me clarify. No one asked them about their views on a two-state solution or their thoughts on the nation-state law before assaulting them. Conflating all Jews with Israel is the epitome of anti-Semitism. It doesn't matter if its adherents try to dress it up as anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, pure and simple. And I'm honored to have followed my friend Governor Locke, whose leadership I deeply admire. And ADL is an organization that has fought the anti-Asian hate that has racked this country. As Gary said, it's not new, but the surge of it in the last 18 months has been disgusting. But I would draw your attention to the universal public outrage around anti-AAPI violence, which was spawned by a blame game, by wild accusations launched by our former president and his fellow travelers. No one in public life suggested that the vicious harassment and random assaults of elderly Asian Americans was justified because of frustration over Beijing's policies toward the Uyghur community or because of its clampdown on democracy in Hong Kong. Indeed, the unequivocal statements of support for our AAPI brothers and sisters, they were appropriately swift and inspiring. By the same token, the equivocal statements, or lack thereof, when Jews similarly were being assaulted earlier this year, were shameful and indefensible. What makes it even worse is that these waves of anti-Jewish racism, if we are being honest, are coming from all sides. No matter what you might hear from partisans on one end of the spectrum or the other, hatred of Jews is neither the sole province of the extreme right or the radical left. Neither side of the spectrum, neither side is exempt from intolerance. Both are taken with different theories about how our society works or should work. But typically it's one where there's no place for Jews showing up on their own terms. One side blames the Jewish people, but claims to respect the Jewish state. The other side blames the Jewish state, but claims to respect the Jewish people. Sense the pattern? Both are normalizing anti-Semitism, using it as a weapon against their foes instead of as a shield to genuinely protect the Jewish community and our interests. This isn't some abstract fear. It's an unnerving reality that's taking shape around us every day. ADL conducted a survey this past May following the conflict between Israel and Hamas and the rise in related anti-Semitic incidents here at home. We saw a 115% increase in such acts year over year in the month of May. We found that 3/4 of American Jews were more concerned about anti-Semitism in the US than before. 60% had themselves witnessed behavior or comments that were deemed anti-Semitic. And the FBI's most recent hate crimes data, released just a few months ago, while an imperfect snapshot, shines a light on this growing problem, revealing the highest total in 12 years. And attacks against the Jewish community make up a staggering 60% of religion-based hate crimes, despite the fact that Jews are 1.8% of the population. We also know that what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. Anti-Semitism may be the most persistent or prominent form of hate, but it almost always serves as a harbinger of other forms of bigotry, and this too is playing out right before our eyes. While more people stayed at home, the COVID-19 pandemic didn't reduce the number of hate crimes. As we heard from Governor Locke just a few minutes ago, and as we're talking about here today, across the board, attacks are up against the LGBTQI community, the Latinx community, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and African Americans, who continue to suffer more than any other community from hate crimes. Overall, hate crimes against people of color rose a staggering 43%, and anti-Asian hate crimes nearly doubled. While it might not be entirely clear what's driving all of these attacks, one should look no further than the disinformation and conspiracy theories peddled online and echoed by some elected officials and media pundits for signals that stereotypes are okay. Take, for example, the recent mainstreaming of the white supremacist Great Replacement theory, the conspiratorial and hate-filled notion that white people are systematically being replaced by people of color, Mexicans, Muslims, immigrants. Once the domain of far-right extremists, this conspiracy theory has slowly moved into the mainstream. And as I noted, it was on full display in Charlottesville, and later by the Pittsburgh shooter, who again seared the soul of this very community. Recently, we've seen the Great Replacement theory getting a megaphone from primetime hosts like Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham on Fox News. I've called it out again and again and again because it is dangerous and disturbing that millions of viewers each night watch the open embrace of a conspiracy theory that has prompted unthinkable violence. And yet with each monologue on mainstream television, the fringe inches further into the forefront of our society. And so we have to ask ourselves, when will this rhetoric stop? Will it continue until we have another El Paso, Christchurch, Pittsburgh, another insurrection even? Or will it just continue unabated, even as more blood is spilled? And then there is social media, which is nothing less, I would assert, than a super spreader of disinformation and hate. And no service exemplifies this more so than Facebook. As the revelations have come in over the past few weeks, we've been reminded of what we already knew, that Facebook lies and dissembles to the public while it rakes in billions of profits. Its algorithms amplify the most extreme voices in a way that would make Pravda pale in comparison. It's appalling that it took the bravery of one woman, Frances Haugen, to remind the world of how Facebook's leadership continues to ignore this problem and put profits over people. This is why we organized the Stop Hate for Profit campaign that Jeff mentioned in his intro, that led more than 1,200 advertisers from Coke and McDonald's and Levi's, Starbucks to come off the platform. This is why we coordinated the celebrity walk-off on Instagram. And this is how we got a series of confessions. We haven't gotten those. Concessions. Good luck. Concessions from Facebook, like to hire a VP of civil rights to oversee this work, like to finally classify Holocaust denialism as the hate speech that we know that it is, like to finally eject extremists off their service. And yet a year later, Facebook is more imposing than ever, with more than 2.9 billion users, $80 billion in revenue, and $1 trillion in market capitalization. We've got to face the facts about its size and scope. Now, I think it's long overdue for Facebook to do what any other business in any other industry would do if their product was poisoning its customers. Take it off the shelf and fix it. Take it out of circulation and correct it. And demonstrate the moral leadership that the public should expect from you. But since Facebook, since Mark Zuckerberg seems unwilling to undertake this most basic act of decency, I would argue that the time has come for regulatory intervention. Whether that comes from Washington, D.C., or from state attorneys general, or even overseas, governments, Josh Cohen, I hope you're listening, governments must hold Facebook accountable for its malign practices and monopolistic indifference in order to protect our kids and our communities. To paraphrase what my friend Sacha Baron Cohen said at ADL's Never Is Now Summit in 2019, freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. And so it's time to shut that down. So what else will it take to move the needle in the fight against anti-Semitism and to push back on this rising tide of prejudice? First, there's no silver bullet, no single approach. We actually need a whole of society strategy to heal our collective wounds. That means all stakeholders, government bodies, political parties, businesses, media outlets, nonprofit organizations, houses of worship, college and universities, cultural institutions. We all need to join hands and work together to pull us back from the brink and steel ourselves for what promises to be a long battle. Frankly, your work here in Pittsburgh stands as a role model for the rest of the country in this regard. We need our nation's leadership to recognize the problem and firmly and forcefully condemn hate whenever it happens, especially when it appears among your own allies. You see, it's easy to finger point and play politics, blaming the other side. It's harder to push back on your peers, but there's nothing partisan in calling out prejudice. All leaders should adopt a zero-tolerance policy on intolerance, period. But we also need to convert talk into action, and that starts with broad and innovative solutions. We need better data and more accountability, creative approaches and smart partnerships, responsible policy, and better politics. But it starts with discussion, introspection, and understanding. Liberal democracy itself depends on such dialogue, rooted in facts, and a citizenry armed with information and thus able to participate effectively in an open society. That means creating the metaphorical space and the literal freedom So a person has the confidence to take a controversial position on a college campus without fear of retribution, the opportunity to pull the lever of their choice in the voting booth without worrying about laws that would restrict that access, and the certainty to express an unorthodox idea, to stand up as an ally, and to show up for others, perhaps even at a conference like this. That's why today matters so much. In closing, we at ADL stand ready to make our resources and experts available, and indeed, to work alongside you in any way possible as we pursue our shared goal to eradicate hate. Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.